Hey there, this is Fritz Westover, your viticulturist here at Virtual Viticulture Academy and on the Vineyard Underground podcast. And I've got a question from the field today from a grower in Minnesota. And this grower specifically is asking about sulfur sensitivity in a variety of grapes they have. So let's dig into this a little bit. This grower in Minnesota says, we have a variety called Sabravois that is sulfur sensitive. And I looked this variety up. It's a mix or a sister of another variety that's cold hardy known as St. Croix. And the grower wants to know, what exactly does sulfur sensitivity mean? So let's start there. So when we hear that a grape variety is sulfur sensitive, that is referring specifically to the fungicidal elemental sprays of sulfur. So if you're applying sulfur as a fungicide to prevent specifically powdery mildew in your grapes, then you don't want to apply elemental sulfur or liquid sulfur to any varieties that are known to be sensitive, because it will burn their foliage, their leaves, any green tissue, maybe even flowers that are out there in the vineyard. Whereas most varieties are not sulfur sensitive. Most of your vinifera varieties, so Cab, Merlot, Malbec, all of these are not sensitive to sulfur. Some other varieties, in addition to Sabravois, that are sulfur sensitive would include mostly hybrid grapes like Chambourcin, which is a French-American hybrid, commonly grown in the northeastern United States, Maréchal Foch, which is another hybrid grape, and Norton, which is a common grape in the South and the Eastern United States as well. Norton, also known in some circles as Cynthiana. So those are all sulfur sensitive. So we would avoid using sulfur in a spray program for a powdery mildew prevention program. We would instead use other products that control powdery mildew. And there are many that do. If you have a sulfur sensitive variety in your vineyard and you have non-sulfur sensitive varieties in the same vineyard, one trick you could use is you can spray your non-sulfur sensitive varieties separately, or you could just spray the sensitive variety first, but exclude the sulfur from the tank. And after your sensitive variety has been sprayed with no sulfur in the tank, you add the sulfur to your spray tank and do the rest of the vineyard. And you have to be careful not to drift any of that sulfur over into the rows where your sensitive varieties are. So, how does one find out what degree and what percent or pounds of sulfur can be applied to the soil without creating a problem? Actually, soil applied sulfur or elemental sulfur or sulfur-based fertilizers are not a problem. It's really only the spraying of sulfur, that elemental sulfur, on the tissues themselves, the leaves, the shoots, the shoot tips, the flowers. That's where you get the burn. But you can apply elemental sulfur or sulfur-based fertilizers, if that's what you have available to you, to the soil, and that does not cause any burn or ill effects in sulfur-sensitive varieties of grapes. And then the last question is it the vines, the grapes, or both? What does it look like? What does one look for to identify the vine sensitivity? And typically what happens is, if you're spraying sulfur on a sulfur-sensitive variety, even if it's not hot temperatures, because we know that all varieties of grapes can burn due to sulfur that's applied at very hot temperatures. I'm going to say above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or if you're very humid and are above 85 degrees, you could still see some leaf burn due to sulfur. But in sulfur-sensitive varieties, they will burn regardless of the temperature, even at cooler temperatures. So you're going to see brown necrotic spots on the leaves, oftentimes at the bottom of the margin of the leaf where sulfur can run down to the bottom. With gravity, that's where you're going to see more burning at the margin of the leaf on the lower side, where the sulfur accumulates in that spray. And that's where you would really look first. And then the last question is, does this express sensitivity in the wine? And no, the wine is completely separate. If you're using sulfites in your wine, that is completely separate from using elemental sulfur in the vineyard as a fungicide. So I hope these tips were helpful for you in terms of getting a better understanding of what sulfur-sensitive variety really means. There's not a whole lot of those varieties out there. Usually a good university extension publication on grape varieties and spray programs for those varieties will list those varieties that are sulfur-sensitive. Some varieties of grapes are also sensitive to copper, and some grape varieties are also sensitive to certain fungicides that are commercial, conventional fungicides too. So always check your label. The label's the law, and it will help guide you in the program to let you know that you're not applying it on the wrong type of grape. If you're not sure, reach out. You can always reach out to us by going to vineyardundergroundpodcast.com click on the Ask Fritz button and submit your question, and I'll answer it for you. Maybe we'll put it up here as well. Thanks, and hope to see you soon.